Hello, members of the Grace Church Community Council. I've missed your faces. Pastor Marks, thank you for opening the chapel to host this important meeting about COVID-19. They said we could gather together in small groups, so here we are, guided by Spirit and by the strength of our leadership.
Amen.
Amen. I also want to give thanks to the Lord that I am alive today. As you all know, I am a nurse by profession, but some of you may not know that back in March, I tested positive for COVID-19.
No.
Yes. It was such an eye-opening experience. I told the doctor I was in pain. He did not believe me. I said I was in pain. And he underestimated me. Why was my pain not real? Why did he think I was imagining my pain? When in fact, I know that my pain is centuries old. I told him that I couldn't breathe, that every time I took a deep breath, it felt like 1,000 needles were piercing me through my chest. I told him my throat and neck were swollen. He asked me if I was suffering from any stress. I said, well, who isn't? He then said in a nonchalant tone, Naomi? Did I say that right? Great. It looks like it's just a panic attack. I said, no, this isn't anxiety, sir. I can't taste anything, and I lost my sense of smell. He then asked me about my pre-existing conditions and family history. I was growing really tired of his overt biases towards me, so I was like, well, let me see, doctor. I got conditions embedded into my DNA that I ain't even asked for. Meanwhile, I'm living a healthy life. I can't say much about my family history, but I do know that it's comprised of systemic racism, poverty, redlining, food apartheid, PTSD, and trauma. He then interrupted me with, I'm guessing that also includes diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular problems, asthma, and depression, right? I looked at him real hard and said, Doctor, you may not recognize me, but I work on the 3rd floor in pediatrics, and I know we have a limited supply, but you need to test me for COVID-19 ASAP. He was like a deer in headlights. He left the room to grab a COVID test, and all I kept thinking about was if I was a regular Black patient, he would have sent me home with a psych referral. He came back in, shoved that swab up my nose, and told me to go home and quarantine for a week until I got my results. A week. Now, mind you, this was in early March, right before DC started shutting down. So I panicked. I was out of sick days, I already took my vacation, and I only had one personal day left. The White House had just declared a global pandemic, and I am an essential worker. If I don't work, will I lose my job? And if I get really sick, who's gonna feed my 3 kids and my diabetic mother with dementia? I'm a widow, and I got family down south. Who was gonna help me? How could I quarantine at home without putting my family in danger? They weren't trying to give me a bed at the hospital. And when my results came in positive, they just told me to quarantine at home and to come back if my symptoms got worse. But where was I supposed to heal? By the grace of God, I stand here today before you as a survivor who had a generous coworker who let me quarantine in her guest bedroom. And while I was away, my mother's home health aide volunteered to work longer days and even slept over some nights. She considers us family. Even my oldest son, who just turned 17, stepped up and took care of his siblings. Lord knows how scary those days were as I laid up in a strange bed, not being able to fully breathe. But I thank God I had family who looked out for me. This is what community does, my people. I gathered us here today because I need you all to realize that what we are experiencing is a capitalistic pandemic. It is imperative that we take immediate action. But before I go on, let me ask y'all some validating questions. Raise your hand if the following is true for you. Once your hands are raised, please keep them up high in the air. How many of you have ever felt that your healthcare institution did not prioritize your health? How many times did a doctor refuse to give you pain medication because they didn't think your pain was severe enough, even during childbirth or a major surgery? How many of you have faced health discrimination because of your pre-existing conditions? How many of you do not trust this government? That's right. Every hand is up, and it's within reason. Why should we trust this government with our health?
Amen.
Remember when all those nurses were furloughed back in April? Mm-hmm. I wasn't one of them, but I was disheartened by the fact that the hospitals were firing nurses during a national health crisis. This is because hospitals are businesses, my people.
That's right.
And just like a business, preventing bankruptcy during a pandemic means you must cut costs like staff salaries. And here's the catch-22. Some sources revealed that many hospital CEOs were pocketing extra money. If you're wondering how that's possible, just look at the CARES Act. For those who are unfamiliar, the CARES Act is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which designated a total of $175 billion for COVID-19 response efforts. It offered reimbursement to healthcare entities for expenses or lost revenues. Hospitals were allocated $100 billion from the act itself, an additional $75 billion in loans from the Paycheck Protection Program. Interestingly enough, most of the multi-million-dollar PPP loans were granted to private and nonprofit hospitals with less than 500 employees. Not surprising, huh? However, the real downfall of the CARES Act is that funding allocation was based on past revenue. This disadvantaged many hospitals in underrepresented areas because Black, Indigenous, people of color populations generate lower revenues due to underinsurance and undertreatment. This is why the hospitals in our communities are receiving less relief right now. Did they even consider that we're the ones that need the relief the most? Did it not matter? As I mentioned earlier, this is a capitalistic pandemic, a clear case of racial capitalism. It's ironic, right? This CARES Act, they don't care about pre-existing conditions. They don't care that we take public transportation every day. They don't care that we live in inclusionary zoning and affordable dwelling units that tightly house hundreds of low-income families in every building. They don't care that the majority of us are considered essential workers and are putting our lives on the line. These are the social issues that we face every day. And this is why Black and Latino people are dying at disproportionate rates. The most blatant truth to reckon with right now is that COVID-19 is not an isolated health issue in our community. For years and years, racial capitalism has been the cause of health inequalities in the United States. Our lives have been devalued because of the color of our skin and socioeconomic statuses. The evidence is right under your nose. Just take Flint, Michigan as an example. Take a look at our history. The Tuskegee experimentation on Black bodies, the sterilization of Puerto Rican women. The list is long and traumatic. But look around you, family. Look at this community. We gotta depend on each other so we can grow and survive. As the city continues to shut down this summer, some of our immediate goals should be assisting neighbors who are vulnerable to the heat and to be on the lookout for families who are living in abusive homes. Pastor Marks has graciously offered a few air-conditioned rooms at the rectory, so let's make sure we get the right people in them. Miss Gloria couldn't join us today, but she sent an email that suggested supermarket runs for the sick and elderly. I think that's a great idea, and we should organize it soon. Underneath your chairs, you'll find some cards and pencils. Let's take a few moments to write down some ideas about other services and programs that we can offer. And if you got any fundraising thoughts, those are welcome too. I'll give you all about 5 minutes to brainstorm, and then we can share our responses.
Good idea.
And family, I just want to remind you that we are descendants of survivors. Let's keep our faith strong and fight this thing. Let's work towards building a future that values Black pain.
Amen. Tell them.
Yes, sister.